Long ago, when the memory of Cain was not so distant from the hearts of his children, before the need to hide under the cloak of the masquerade, an era of religious furor and terrible weakness for mortals, step back from the neon city streets of the modern vampire setting. Journey to a time when soaring cathedrals stood like heavenly fever dreams amidst the squalor and misery of the lepers, serfs, and vermin below. This is the true world of darkness the masquerade setting always promised us. The World of Darkness role-playing series posits a fantasy game set in the real world inhabited by horror creatures like werewolves, witches, fey creatures, and of course, vampires. In the vampire setting, you play as one of the children of the night, a damned soul that was embraced by one of the children of Cain, first of the murderers and cursed by God to walk the earth preying on humans. Who you were in life vanishes along with your humanity, and what emerges after the terrible exsanguination is a monster with the guise of a man. Instead of a noble hero out to slay monsters, you get to be one of those monsters. You have to stay out only at night, sleep in coffins and graveyards, and of course imbibe vitae. The red primal force of life itself must be begged, bargained, or ripped from the veins of the living. The most commonly known part of this world is Vampire the Masquerade, the originator of the series from 1991. It was further made known to the public through a critically acclaimed video game called Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. However, in 1996, the game was transported from the late 20th century goth punk setting of the original into a more familiar medieval role-playing setting. That's where I first interacted with the series as a reader and a player, and I've loved it ever since. Being a horror movie nerd since childhood, I instantly loved the idea of playing as a bad guy. After watching them get staked, burned, and decapitated for so long, I began to sympathize with the fanged monsters. And I will admit that a little Anne Rice didn't hurt either. What is their motivation for getting up out of the coffin every night? Who were they in life? The vampire setting gives you all the tools you need to build the mind and soul of an undead beast struggling against that nature, though you certainly don't have to be vicious or evil. In fact, it's pretty much expected that you will be a more interview with a vampire, tortured soul type of vampire. The motives and emotions of your character are yours to suss out. Do you love the new power you have, or does your character curse the day she was embraced? The moral consequences on your sanity and soul and your positions make for magnificent role-playing. Finding what the Cainites call roads, or via, can help you claim some sense of purpose as a cursed being. The Road of the Devil suggests that vampires were designed to be evil by no less than God himself. So why not act upon that? It is his wish, after all. The Road of the Beast, preferred by the animalistic gangrel, intends to keep the demon on a long leash, so it will be less likely to snap. Throughout this is the struggle against your inner violent nature. You must drain life from mortals to survive, but if you give in too often and lose too much willpower, you will be unable to control your character. She will be effectively dead, well, really dead in her mind at least. An animal under the control of nothing but the beast within. The Via give you certain virtues to practice, such as self-control or instinct. But you can also develop neuroses called derangements when your character acts against their virtues, a bit like breaking your alignment. Choosing merits, things that are good and useful about yourself, and flaws, disadvantageous traits that hold you back, is an important part of the game. Not having negative aspects of your character to be a drain on you is one of the worst aspects of modern RPGs. It's something that should be brought back for all modern games to make role-playing more complicated. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and you can't get a free perk without a drawback. Everyone in the real world has good parts and bad parts of their character. For a vampire, that could mean a grotesque appearance that causes mortals to shun you, or a terrible phobia of something that paralyzes you in fear during a crisis. The gameplay systems themselves are exciting and interesting parts of role-playing your character. How much morality are you willing to lose to accomplish a task? Or how long can you survive without being true to your inner nature, whatever that entails? Studying and learning these systems is more like writing an autobiography for your character than a tedious system of dice rolls. It expands upon what's called the alignment system in D&D, and makes it intrinsic to every moment of your life and every choice you make. Even the simple act of feeding yourself becomes a deep and troubling moral conundrum. It's that kind of role-playing depth that makes me love Vampire the Dark Ages, because every moral action is placed against a world of intense devotion and sin. The medieval mind was based on placing moral quandaries about life and afterlife above mundane concerns about the day-to-day existence. And that embodies the vampires of the World of Darkness more concerned with who they are inside than dissecting and learning the world of modernity. Once you have decided who you were in life and how you have chosen to be motivated in your unlife, you can then choose a clan. You can be an aristocratic Zhi-meesh, using his hauteur to bully and enslave serfs. In the olden days, the Slavic nobles openly fought one another across the forests and mountains of Eastern Europe, laying waste to villages, sending armies of minions into the field, and draining boyars that dare to assert mortal authority over their rightful betters. Or perhaps the Nosferatu, hideous of aspect, cunning of mind. The Nosferatu hide amongst communities of lepers and beggars. They are expert gatherers of secrets and haunt plague-ridden villages, turning the most miserable wretches into unholy creatures of the night. There are 13 clans to choose from, along with the Catif, who swear no allegiance to anyone. The Book of Vampire: The Dark Ages contains a wealth of material about the extensive political intrigues, conflicts, and goals of all the groups. It's enough material for years of campaigns, and the supplements set in that era are just as exciting. The Dark Ages rulebook began to fill in gaps about the history of the vampire world, later expanded on in other editions of the Masquerade. And you are free to bridge the gap between the medieval and modern Cainite history. Discover what happened to the Cappadocians before they were crushed by the Clan Giovanni, or writing the thrilling conclusion to the battles between the Assamites and their Crusader enemies. The medieval world intrigues me far more than the modern on a personal level. I prefer the strange alien way of thinking those pre-Age of Reason people had. It involves a totally different way of looking at the world, and frankly I prefer it to the Masquerade. The World of Darkness games using what they call the Storyteller rule system is a bit less complicated than traditional D&D, and the Vampire series' mood, style, and flavor text are even more important. In order to successfully tell a properly horror-themed adventure, you must know your horror literature and film. There are 1,000 different movies and stories to examine to find the properly gothic atmosphere for your world. Just as Dungeons & Dragons allowed you to be a part of the Lord of the Rings, Vampire allows you to be a part of Dracula. The Dark Ages is my favorite setting for the World of Darkness, because it really was a world of darkness in those days. One where the attitude of the average man was driven by his plague-ridden, blood-drenched ignorance. Vampire: The Dark Ages takes place long before the traditional late 18th and 19th century Europe that created the genre. But in many ways, traveling to the distant forests of Eastern Europe, like Transylvania, was supposed to transport the main characters back in time to a more aristocratic, less modern Europe than Victorian readers were used to. The Dark Ages setting takes you to a time when the entirety of the known world was a less civilized, backwards Europe. The origin of all of those quote-unquote Gothic symbols, art, theme, ideas, and feelings that created the Gothic world and that were intentionally revivified in the 19th century to create the Romantic and then Gothic fiction. Why not use the Dark Ages setting to go back to the source? That's where a lot of vampire lore comes from, after all, is a romantic, modernist interpretation of medievalism. So why not go back to the actual Middle Ages? The mood and attitude of the vampires during the Masquerade is a mirror of humanity. Jaded and somewhat disillusioned despite the progress of science and society. Vampires in the Dark Ages were far more insular and fewer than number. Even in a giant city like Baghdad or Constantinople, only a few hundred may exist. Without electricity to illuminate the world, vampires truly must live in utter darkness. Only the meager flickering of a torch or a candle pushes away the night. Humans, moreover, all believe in the supernatural. There's no need to masquerade. The Age of Reason is long off. Vampires are simply known to be real to the average person in the Dark Ages campaign. It binds the player characters under closer scrutiny from humans, yes, but it's also liberating because the lack of communication between people means a massive conflict or event can take place without anyone ever knowing about it. One of the original issues with the Masquerade is that you were given so many supernatural abilities, but could only occasionally use them, under very specific circumstances. If anyone saw you, you would be breaking the Masquerade. The Dark Ages still has rules for vampire society, the so-called traditions of Cain, and they're similar to the Masquerade, but you are able to bend or break them for your own purposes more often. No more worrying about mortals using video cameras or cell phones to record your dark acts. If you get involved with a brutal onslaught of werewolves in the center of town, you can do whatever you wish to defeat them, magic and all if you can use it. You shouldn't be too open, of course. The kind may be stupid, but they're no fools. If you simply exclaim your vampirism in public, you may be burned at the stake. Part of being a vampire is hiding amongst the herd, and you don't want to attract the attention of the church. Many Cainites, including the Toreador, are quite fond of the Roman Church, and incongruously as creatures of darkness are quite fond of Christianity. One of the roads is the road of heaven. On that via, God has made the kindred into his avengers on earth to smite murderers and other criminals in his holy name. But the Church of the 1100s is just waking up into the madness of the Inquisition. Stirrings of violence in the south of France would soon provoke the Albigensian Crusade and the attendant atrocities. Witchfinders and vampire hunters have church backing and money. Their wrath will be swift if they find you meddling in their affairs. If you have the power, you can tear and burn away at the mortal world as much as you like. The only consequences are how many mortals you are willing to destroy to end their hunting you. The game is set in 1197 at the height of the Crusades, a century-long tidal wave of blood and zealotry that swept Europe and the Middle East. Unlike the modern period, which pulls in the story to focus more on a local level, like a city, a Dark Age campaign can more readily accommodate world events and geopolitics. The chivalric Ventru can goad the Knights Templar into civilizing the Baltic pagans, and war against the Slavic Zhi-meesh in the process. The Muslim Assamites can wage a desperate campaign of assassination to try and retake the Holy Land from Frankish invaders. Crusading has stirred up a host of jealousies, rivalries, hatreds, and opportunities for learning across Europe. Even without making it the centerpiece, the Holy Wars are excellent backdrops for any campaign. A bloody spectacle of carnage the players must navigate in secret, forever close to peril and violence at the hands of human fanatics and zealous vampires on all sides. The setting can be an exact analog of medieval Europe, or if you favor more freedom, you can write a heavily fictionalized version with fake provinces or even countries and kings. I always felt the anime series Berserk, especially the world of the post-eclipse where demons were walking openly, could be a great style to take from to start a Vampire the Dark Ages game. The medieval world has no shortage of enemies for Cainites. The vile werewolf packs roam Europe, freer than they could ever be in the modern age. Cabals of self-proclaimed vampire hunters roam particularly well-organized towns. The church is a knife's edge. It can be infiltrated and gently coaxed in certain areas by some vampire clans, or it can be the home of a fanatic host of vampire killers. The Bailey, those devilish bastards with plots infernal, are lurking and performing terrible rites to bring about the end of the world. In a time before modern communication and far smaller populations, who knows what dread creatures they could be attempting to summon leagues away from any human settlement. And there was always the deadliest foe forever erupting the vampire world into bloodshed. Other Cainites. The Tremere have only recently built themselves into a clan, after basely slaying and diablerizing a vampire elder. These upstart sorcerers are sowing havoc across Europe. The Gangrel and Tzimisce have vowed to wipe these conjurers from the earth. They have not yet succeeded, and not for lack of trying. Loathsome creatures called gargoyles have been made by the black arts and sent against the wizard's enemies. This terrible war is causing a fire in Central and Eastern Europe, and your characters could easily get involved in it. 20 years ago I bought Vampire the Dark Ages on a whim. I'd never heard of the series, and the only pen-and-paper RPG I'd ever played to that point was Dungeons & Dragons. I found this in the bookstore next to Vampire the Masquerade. I could only afford one at the time and was a bit wary about playing an RPG in modern times. It was weird not to be playing in the traditional medieval setting, so I went for one I could more readily relate to. After finding a group to play with, I was off and running and loved everything about the world, the setting, the story, the characters. All of the lore about this was absolutely magnificent. Since then I have played in the more familiar modern Masquerade setting and have grown to love that one too. However, I cut my teeth, or cut my fangs I should say, in Europe's dismal past. This is my favorite World of Darkness setting, and if you're accustomed to the modern original, you should try to set a campaign in the Dark Ages. It may just be something you'll love and a fresh take after all those years in modernity. Unfortunately, playing Vampire the Dark Ages is a little difficult because of the later releases. You see, it was overtaken in later editions by a separate title called, just to confuse you, Dark Ages Vampire, which is very similar. Playing that game version of the medieval World of Darkness may be superior in terms of game rules, but I think it may be a little bit more expensive to get into it based on what I've seen. You can find the excellent sourcebook for the original Vampire the Dark Ages usually for $10 or less online, and the plethora of supplements they wrote for it is worth checking out too. This was the true horror game that I had been waiting for all my life. Playing as a bloodsucker skulking in the shadows of medieval ruins ready to despoil the mortal world. I've only given you a very brief overview of the World of Darkness setting and Vampire and all of that, so I urge you to check it out. It's really, really fun, especially as I said in a medieval world. It's incredible seeking a maddening truth about reality and nature from forgotten vampire lore. Whether you're just new to the Dark Ages setting and are familiar with the modern Vampire, or you're totally new to the World of Darkness series, or even to pen and paper RPGs in general, give this game a look. It's cheap, easy to get into, pretty easy to play, and lets you fall into the thrilling shadows of gothic horror that made so many of us terrified and excited since we first saw Dracula as a child. And it's a brand new take on Gothic. This is the real Gothic age of the dark medieval past, and it has a different vibe than even the 18th and 19th century traditional Gothic fiction. sink your teeth into this backwards world and live as a blackguard and villain, just like you know you've always wanted to be. Or a heroic vampire who's just trying to save the world and slake his bloodlust all at the same time. It's an absolutely amazing game. I urge you to check it out.
Take that, vile fiend!
Dad, that's his crutch.
Oh, sorry.
So thank you very much for watching this video. My name is Michael. This has been Vampire: The Dark Ages. This is just a very brief little overview about this game series. I think it's absolutely amazing. I really love the medieval setting in the Vampire World of Darkness campaign. It's really exciting. I really enjoy playing it. I haven't played a game in a while, but it was absolutely amazing. And I was looking around when I was moving, and I happened to find this book that I hadn't looked at in years. And it was incredible, and I went back into it, and I love the flavor text, I love the world, it's all exciting. So I'm going to link a few more sort of horror-themed videos here, my review of Bloodborne, the video game, and also my review of the Ravenloft campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons. Make sure to check those out too, and make sure to please subscribe if you want to see more of these videos about RPGs and about classic movies and television shows that I really like and some video games that I love. And also, please like this video if you liked it. I am going to go drain one of the kine of their blood because it's been a while making this video, and I want to slake my bloodthirst right now. So, yeah, have a good night.